On a midsummer night, Ethan received bloody photos of Henry and Margaret and his young son, Milo, kidnapped. He rushed into the lounge, only to find his wife, Vivian, intimately entangled with her first love, Julian. Ethan took out the photos, pleading for help, but she scoffed, accusing him of fabricating lies. Julian casually dismissed it as a game of escape room. Vivian flew into a rage and ordered her men to lock Ethan in a suspended iron cage. 7 days later, she came looking for him, but found only Ethan holding 3 urns. On a midsummer night, Vivian said she was going with her best friend to a new art exhibition in the South City. As was preparing a surprise at home, his phone vibrated. The screen displayed a set of bloody photos, Henry and Margaret and Milo tied to iron chairs. Bring 2 million within 8 hours to redeem them, or wait to collect their bodies. Your wasteful wife has hoarded all the money. You must be desperate now. Don't even think about calling the police. I'm a ruthless criminal, and adding a few more lives means nothing to me. The location showed the lounge. Ethan didn't even have time to grab his jacket, stumbling out the door. The moment he pushed open the private room door, all the blood in his veins froze. Under the crystal chandelier, an atmosphere of ambiguous intimacy hung heavy. Vivian leaned languidly in Julian's arms, her eyes flirted, brimming with a seductive allure. She was wearing the dress Ethan had saved up for months to buy. Julian's long fingers caressed her waist, his gaze flippant. Baby, why pretend to be pure at home? Vivian chuckled, biting his ear. That pauper isn't even fit to touch me. It felt as if Ethan's heart was being squeezed by an iron fist. That dress was meant to be a surprise for their anniversary. Suppressing the surge of anger within him, Ethan stared intensely at Julian's wrist. A dark red scar, with starkly visible memories flooded back. Henry and Margaret had once mentioned adopting a resentful boy. That boy had a scar on his wrist, and swore to make them pay blood for blood. Julian suddenly looked up at Ethan, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. Ethan instantly understood the source of the messages. He rushed into the private room, wanting to pull Vivian away, but she flinched in surprise. She nervously straightened her clothes, her eyes darting around. How did you find this place? Soon, she regained her arrogance. What kind of kidnapping drama are you fabricating? Do you want me home that badly? She nestled back into Julian's embrace. Julian is so capable, he would never do such a thing. Ethan grabbed her wrist, but another hand blocked him. Vivian gazed at Julian with adoration. Meanwhile, Ethan stared fixedly at the red string on Julian's hand. It was Milos' favorite lucky charm. Ethan lunged at Julian, his fists clenched until his knuckles turned white. Vivian, however, stepped in front of Julian, her eyes filled with disdain. What? Jealous of his physique? Who would ever be interested in a scrawny man like you? Her nail-polish-tipped finger poked Ethan's chest. But don't worry, Julian never demands commitment. I lines come home when I've had my fun. Your position is still secure. Ethan fought back the churning nausea in his stomach. Did you see the scar on his wrist? Yes, the ungrateful wretch Henry and Margaret told us about. And that red string, it's clearly Milo's lucky charm. Vivian frowned impatiently. Who doesn't have a red string? She suddenly noticed the scar on Julian's wrist, and leaned in for a closer look. Ethan thought she had finally come to her senses, but then he saw her tenderly caress the wound. Did you get this when you were working hard before? Does it still hurt? Julian shot Ethan a cold glance. Not as painful as being misunderstood by family. Ethan couldn't hold back any longer. Henry and Margaret's lives are hanging in the balance, and you are here flirting. Before he could finish, a sharp slap landed hard across Ethan's face. Ethan, do you think I'm too easygoing? Julian is so outstanding, and you are accusing him of kidnapping Henry and Margaret. Maybe you are the one who hid them, trying to trick me into coming home. Ethan frantically pulled out his phone, but she shoved him away. The phone flew, and Ethan's temple hit the corner of the coffee table. The exhaustion of recent days instantly overwhelmed him. To help her save face in front of her best friend, Ethan had worked non-stop for a week. His vision blurred, and the phone landed right at her feet. When she saw the figures in the photos, her face went rigid. Who took these? Then she noticed Ethan's pained expression, and panic flashed in her eyes. She knew how hard he had been working lately. She grabbed the pill bottle from the floor, and saw the words, heart medication. Ethan, don't be afraid. I'll give you your medicine now, and we'll go find Henry and Margaret. She fumbled to pour out a pill. Julian, however, let out a soft sigh at that moment. Vivian, you are so easily fooled. They are clearly just playing cards in the photo and needed you back. Vivian's expression immediately turned cold. Julian crouched beside Ethan, staring at his flushed face. A heart attack would cause immediate unconsciousness. Who would still be pretending to be pathetic and waiting to be fed medicine? Vivian sneered, tossing the pill to the ground, her sharp heel grinding over it. Since you want to act so much, why don't you lick up the crushed medicine? Ethan's temples throbbed, and black spots danced before his eyes. Thinking of Henry and Margaret and Milo still waiting for him, he gritted his teeth, fighting off the dizziness. His palms were raw, bleeding from where he dug his nails in, as he lowered his head to lick the crushed medicine from the floor. The crumbled pieces of the pill were nowhere near enough, so he had to look up at her again. The women in the private room erupted in shrill laughter. Sister's upbringing is excellent, she has him completely tamed. She just went to the restroom, he's licking the floor, isn't he? If I had a husband like that, I'd die of shame. Vivian smiled, but her eyes were filled with disgust. She took Ethan's phone, deleted the photos, and opened the payment interface. 100,000. I'll take this bottle of wine. Henry and Margaret are waiting for help, how can you be thinking about buying wine? Ethan struggled to stand up, but his body felt weak. She looked down at him imperiously. Ethan, have you forgotten what you are? A poor, useless man. You even concoct such low-grade dramas. Don't pretend to be so devoted. I'll come home when I've had my fun. She ground her stiletto heel into his side. Today, I'll show you what we usually play. Ethan followed her gaze, and an iron cage was slowly descending. A cruel glint flashed in Julian's eyes, and a chill crept into Ethan's heart. He tried to escape, but Vivian's men held him down firmly. You slandered my Henry, and Margaret and my son. Do you think you can just run away so easily? Why won't you believe me? Vivian, when did you become like this? She ground her heel over Ethan's fingers, a sharp crack of bone. What are you pretending for? Do you think this little bit of force can injure you? Stop your tricks. She waved her hand, and the security guards dragged Ethan into the iron cage. Ethan's fingers had been worn raw and fragile from working on construction sites. A young staff member saw his pale face and hesitated, stopping the winch. Miss, if the guest has a heart condition or acrophobia, we can't continue. Vivian slapped him across the face, her expression cold. He works on tall buildings every day, what's he pretending acrophobia for? The others quickly tried to smooth things over. Sorry, the new guy doesn't know the rules. The iron cage continued to ascend, and their voices gradually faded into the distance. These rich people just love the thrill, why so many problems? He's definitely trying to win the ladies' sympathy, just pretending. Ethan looked at the ground receding below, his heart turning to ice. He suddenly noticed a small monitor screen inside the cage. The moment the screen lit up, all the blood in his veins froze. On the screen was a live feed of Henry and Margaret and Milo being tormented. The group of people were slicing off Henry and Margaret's flesh, grinning maliciously. That's for being nosy. Now wait for your daughter to come save you. She's probably having a good time with the boss right now. Blood splattered onto the lens, and Ethan couldn't help but vomit. His vomit fell to the floor below, and Vivian's angry shouts reached him. Teach him a lesson. Make him give in today. The iron cage shook violently, and the bottom now had a layer of sharp blades. Ethan clutched the bars tightly. Vivian, please save them. Just come with me, and I'll do anything you say from now on. My cries dissipated into the high air, but there was no response below. Watching the bloody images on the screen, Ethan gritted his teeth. Julian was doing this on purpose, wanting them to suffer a fate worse than death. Ethan couldn't let Vivian endure such pain. He stepped onto the sharp blades, allowing the flesh to tear. Excruciating pain coursed through his body, his consciousness blurring. The dripping blood finally caught her attention. "Vivian, please let me down, just for a minute." But they were too far away to hear his voice. Ethan bit his tongue to stay conscious and looked down. Vivian was pouring that bottle of red wine onto Julian, then leaned down and licked it. A sharp pain seared through Ethan's chest, and he coughed up another mouthful of blood. Before losing consciousness, he heard someone gasp, "Oh no, something's happened." My entire body felt like it had been crushed, and then haphazardly pieced back together. Every inch of my skin screamed in agony, and even breathing felt like tearing. Vivian stood right before me. Ignoring the pain, I struggled to get up. My hospital gown was soaked with cold sweat, and the IV needle slipped out. "Vivian, Julian is the ungrateful wretch Henry and Margaret told us about. He's tricking you." I grabbed the hem of her dress, and blood stained the pristine white fabric. She looked down at the glaring red, finally revealing a hint of panic. Even her perfect makeup couldn't hide the pallor on her face. "How did you get hurt? Weren't you in the cage the whole time?" Her voice trembled slightly. "Isn't. It's supposed to be very safe in there." "No time to explain. Henry and Margaret are still waiting for us. Hurry, let's go save them." I grabbed her hand, but it was violently flung away by a powerful force. Julian had approached unnoticed, looking down at me with disdain. "Quite the actor, aren't you? First a heart attack, now severe injuries." A mocking smirk played on his lips. "What could possibly hurt you in that cage?" "The blades at the bottom of the cage and the monitor screen. You arranged all of it, didn't you?" Vivian's face instantly paled when she saw the sharp blades in the cage. Her fingers were tightly clasped, her knuckles turning white. "Julian, what exactly have you done? If gets hurt." Julian sneered, then walked to the cage and crouched down. He reached out to touch a blade, and the sharp edge surprisingly retracted. A chill crept into my heart, and an ominous premonition enveloped me. "See? They are just novelty props. No real blades." His voice was soft, as if coaxing a child. "The bloodstains are just ketchup. I even added your favorite honey." He wrapped an arm around Vivian's waist, his fingers suggestively caressing her side. "Darling, don't you just love playing dress up?" Vivian bit her lip lightly, her cheeks flushed. When she turned to me, her eyes held nothing but fury. Those beautiful eyes I once loved now only felt unfamiliar. I dug my nails into my palms, forcing myself to stay conscious. The pain from my wounds kept me alert, and reminded me of the urgency of the situation. "Look at the screen. Henry and Margaret and Milo are still being tortured." Before I could finish, my wounds began to bleed again. Dark red blood spread on the white sheets like a blooming flower. Vivian hesitated for a moment, then finally walked towards the screen. Her steps were slow, as if she were afraid of something. I watched her back, my heart pounding faster and faster. Her shoulders began to tremble as she slowly turned around. I supported myself on my numb legs, gasping for breath. Cold sweat trickled down my forehead, my gaze fixed on the door. Just a little longer, and I could save them. The next second, Vivian's palm slapped hard across my face. A searing pain spread across my face, and my ears rang. "Ethan, don't think my soft heart will let you slander others." I stumbled towards the screen, but only saw a cartoon playing. Winnie the Pooh bounced happily, completely out of place with the atmosphere here. She ordered someone to grab my hair, her nails digging deep into my neck. "If you curse my Henry and Margaret again, I'll cripple you today." I was violently thrown to the floor, my back hitting the edge of the coffee table. When I looked up, she was already sitting on Julian's lap, like a languid cat. "Since you want to watch, I'll let you see enough today." She leaned down, her slender fingers unbuttoned his shirt, one by one. Anger and heartbreak surged through me, and my vision swam. At that moment, the screen suddenly relit, and the scene made me tremble all over. Henry and Margaret knelt on the ground, their foreheads bloody from begging for mercy. Their hair was graying, and their clothes were tattered. "Debts must be paid, it's only right." Julian's voice came from the recording. "A piece of their flesh for 1,000. You choose. Don't go to my daughter, we'll pay it back." Blood splattered across the screen, and I banged frantically against the iron cage. bones hitting the metal bars with a dull thud, yet I felt no pain. Vivian, they raised you, and you degraded yourself here. She impatiently pressed the remote control, and the cage shot upwards. Electricity surged through my body, and I fell heavily to the ground. She just coldly dismissed me with a, "Don't bother me," and resumed her intimate entanglement with Julian. I wanted to say more, but my wrists were cuffed. The cold metal dug deep into my flesh, blood trickling down my arm. Amidst the screams and intimate sounds, my consciousness slowly blurred. I remembered her as the cool and elegant campus beauty, for whom I worked hard for 3 years. She always sat in the last row of the library, quietly reading. The day we broke up, she cried and said, "Ethan, you'll be good to me, won't you?" After we married, I gave her everything, never forced her to do anything against her will. But now, she wouldn't even spare me a glance. The sound of water was close by, and my body finally gave out. The iron cage swayed, and I seemed to see her rushing over with concern. But that was just a dying hallucination. She was still laughing happily in Julian's arms. When my consciousness returned, all illusions vanished. The lights in the private room were ambiguously intimate, and the air was filled with a mix of perfume and blood. Vivian was still intimately entangled with Julian, emitting sickening laughter. And I was still trapped in the iron cage 3 meters high, like a sacrificial offering. The private room door suddenly opened, and several uniformed officers walked in. The lights instantly flared, so bright it was blinding. Routine inspection. Anything out of the ordinary here? The team leader walked beneath the iron cage, glanced at the monitor, and frowned deeply. The heart rate line on the display was jumping erratically, like a dying struggle. YISNT, the person released if their heart rate is abnormal. He looked up at the iron cage. And you don't care that blood is dripping from the cage. This already constitutes assault and battery. Release him immediately. The staff then hastily lowered the iron cage, fumbling to unlock the door. I was covered in blood, the cuff marks on my wrists almost to the bone, my clothes soaked with sweat. The inspector looked at me in disbelief. What exactly happened? I crawled towards him with my last ounce of strength, my lips trembling. "Help me, Julian is killing people." 2 cold stares instantly pierced me, like venomous snakes striking. I clutched the inspector's uniform, like grasping at a final straw. Vivian unhurriedly straightened her clothes, then walked over in her high heels. "Who told you to disturb the guests?" Her voice was soft, with a hint of languor. "We were just having some fun. Why do you insist on interfering?" The inspector looked directly into her eyes. "This is no longer fun. It's murder." She chuckled as she uncuffed my hands, her long fingers swiping across her phone. The notification sound for 100,000 transfer rang out, and she tossed the phone to a mail server. Then she threw a wad of cash onto the inspector's face. "If you want money, just say so. Don't make up excuses. He's my husband. Don't you think I know if he's dead or alive?" The inspector swatted the money aside and pressed her down beside me. "Do you see a single untouched spot on his body?" Vivian finally met my eyes, and a flicker of hesitation crossed her beautiful gaze. The smell of blood made her frown, but Julian quickly pulled her back. Julian kicked the inspector. "I've already called the police." His voice was cold. "Harass my girlfriend again, and you'll disappear." Staff immediately swarmed forward, roughly dragging the inspector out. Vivian cowered in Julian's arms, like a startled rabbit. But from an angle she couldn't see, he ground his heel onto my left hand, crushing it. The sharp, sickening crunch of bones echoed. He leaned down and mouthed silently, "You can't save anyone." Excruciating pain coursed through my body, my consciousness receding like a retreating tide. Before I plunged into darkness, I saw his triumphant smile. A pungent smell stung my nostrils, and my consciousness slowly returned amidst the pain. The glare of the fluorescent lights was blinding, and I squinted, taking a moment to adjust. Henry and Margaret's faces and Milos flashed through my mind, and I shot upright. I had to go find them immediately. Just 2 steps out, my legs felt drained of all strength, and I fell heavily onto the cold tile floor. The nurse at the door quickly put down her tray and rushed to help me. "Are you trying to kill yourself?" Her voice held reproach. Excessive blood loss, multiple fractures. It took 2 days of emergency treatment to save your life. 2 days. A whole 2 days had passed. I clutched her shoulder, my knuckles white from gripping. Has there been any news of a murder case these past 2 days? Anything at all? The nurse cried out in pain as she struggled to help me back to the bed. She smoothed out her wrinkled white lab coat. No, there's been no murder case. You were just too invested, probably stressed out. She knew where I was injured. This wasn't right. I stared into her eyes. Who brought me here? A man who called himself an inspector, wearing a uniform. She said, taking my blood pressure. He seemed quite worried. My heart sank. If had brought me, it would at least mean she believed what I said. But now, she didn't care if I lived or died. The hospital room was quiet, with only the beeping sounds of the machines. I clung to my last shred of hope. These past 2 days has any woman come to see me? The nurse's movements paused, and her eyes filled with sympathy. She gently shook her head. No, only that inspector came a few times. I gave a bitter laugh and replied, all right. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, casting dappled shadows on the floor. The nurse sighed. Get some rest. Don't overthink things. Your wounds haven't healed yet, so don't move around too much. She packed up her medical supplies and left, gently closing the door. I stared at the ceiling for a while, then pulled out my phone. My best friend's call connected quickly. Hello. Help me investigate a factory. My voice was soft, as if afraid to wake something. There are 3 bodies inside. Silence on the other end for a few seconds. Wait for my news. Hanging up the phone, I closed my eyes. Henry and Margaret's loving smiles. Milos childish please. These images flashed before my eyes, but I could no longer grasp them. Julian wasn't just the rich kid she spoke of, he was a true underworld figure. His identity was like a fog, without even proper identification. I had investigated his background, and every lead ended in darkness. With his methods, Henry and Margaret and Milo were likely already in a dire situation. The news was so tightly suppressed. That factory must be hidden in the city's darkest corner. I had just put down the phone after calling the police when the hospital room door was pushed open. Before the smell of disinfectant could dissipate, Vivian rushed in. She wore a designer suit, high heels, and makeup as flawless as a porcelain doll. Ethan, what's gotten into you? Her voice was sharp and grating. It's just a minor infidelity. Is it really worth calling the police? You know Julian's identity is hidden in the shadows. I cut her off, a sharp pain in my chest. You know he lacks proper identification, and you know he's involved in illegal activities. By shielding him like this, aren't you afraid of facing retribution? Don't you know about Henry and Margaret? Thinking of their horrific state, my throat felt constricted, and I couldn't speak. She rolled her eyes impatiently. Here we go again, still acting after all these days. I just got home, and they are not there. Where exactly did you hide them? I gave a bitter smile, saying nothing. Whatever I said, she would only take it as a joke. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, casting a shadow on her face. Why hurt yourself for real? What's the point? This feigned concern only disgusted me. A nurse pushed a medicine tray past, and Vivian immediately adopted a gentle expression. The police wanted to take a statement earlier, but I told them I was your wife, and sent them away. There's no need to waste police resources on such a minor matter. They have a murder case to investigate. She laughed to herself, as if talking about something trivial. I just gave her a cold look, but she was completely oblivious. That gloomy face of yours, as if someone had died, truly bad luck. She took a stack of documents from her designer bag. Oh, by the way, I've already filed for divorce while you were unconscious. Julian and I are taking wedding photos this afternoon. Do you want to come offer suggestions? In the sunlight, her perfect makeup was like a mask. I looked at this familiar face, my heart filled with nothing but coldness. The pure campus beauty from my memory had long since been consumed by desire and selfishness. She turned to leave, her red-soled high heels clicking crisply on the floor. I suddenly spoke, Happy wedding. Her steps paused. You'll look beautiful in your wedding dress. Remember to send me a photo. Her back disappeared through the door, and I forced a smile. Turning over evidence of his hidden identity to the police should be more exciting than a wedding. The sunlight outside the window was perfect, illuminating my phone screen. The wedding photo shoot location bathed in perfect sunlight. Julian, however, couldn't contain himself and sent a photo. Deep in the wilderness, Henry and Margaret's bodies lay like slaughtered sheep. Their bones gleamed with a ghastly white light. Milo still had the pigtails I had tied for him, crooked and messy. That day he had pouted and said, "Daddy's hands are so clumsy," but now he would forever wear this ugly hairstyle. Tears blurred my vision, and I stumbled blindly towards the wilderness in the photo. The autumn wind whipped up dry leaves, covering the bodies with a thin blanket. The exposed bones were pale, like gnawed pig bones. An animalistic wails erupted from my throat as I knelt before them. That night, based on the photo's location data, Julian was apprehended at a derelict factory on the outskirts of the city. The lights of the interrogation were stark white, yet he maintained an arrogant demeanor. "I just lack proper identification. I haven't broken any laws. What right do you have to convict me?" His eyes held a defiant glint, a faint smile playing on his lips. I knew he had destroyed the evidence, and I couldn't act rashly. But looking at his face, and thinking of the ashes I had just collected, I still rushed forward and punched him. Ungrateful wretch. Henry and Margaret raised you, and this is how you repay them. He wiped the blood from his lip, and Vivian burst in. She wore a white dress, her makeup flawless, completely out of place in the grim interrogation. "Ethan, that's enough. I've been tolerating you for too long. Julian has been sorting out his proper identification these past 2 days. I'll spend a few days with you, that should be enough, right?" She secretly slipped money to a prison guard, her voice soft. "Get him a softer bed." Later, she used the excuse of taking him to the restroom, and the two disappeared down the corridor. When they returned, he looked revitalized, and she was glowing, her clothes disheveled. I averted my gaze in disgust, my stomach churning. She pressed close to me, her perfume so strong it made me feel sick. "Tell Anne Margaret to come home, the house is too cold." I gave her a cold look, but said nothing. Julian was indeed cautious. No traces could be found at that factory. The surveillance footage in the private room had also been thoroughly wiped. Vivian was still defending him, saying I was mentally unstable due to my injuries. To expedite the case, I returned to the hospital for a follow-up. The smell of disinfectant was pungent. While waiting for the report, I encountered that nurse. She passed by with a medicine tray, her smile warm. "Don't look so glum, you need to look forward. Oh, the old food factory on the east side has been converted into a pleasure club, the very one you went to." My mind exploded. I immediately rushed back to that private room. The establishment had indeed been converted from a food factory, a security project I was responsible for years ago. For easy inspection at the time, every corner had surveillance cameras. My fingers traced the mottled wall, searching for familiar traces. In a corner hidden by erotic decorations, the camera still glowed with a faint red light. I played back the surveillance footage, and the images on the digital screen were crystal clear. My fingers flew across the keyboard, and based on the background, I quickly pinpointed the location where Henry and Margaret were murdered. An abandoned warehouse, its rust-streaked doors tightly shut, the air thick with the smell of decay. The moment I pushed open the door, the smell of blood hit me immediately. The mottled bloodstains on the ground had long dried and blackened, but they still spoke of the tragedy. I crouched down, my fingers gently brushed the ground, as if I could still feel their last warmth. After gathering all the evidence, I submitted all the materials to the police. On the day of the trial, the courtroom buzzed with activity. Vivian, in a white dress, stood in the witness box like an innocent angel. "My and Margaret are fine, they just went back to their hometown. He's just jealous." "Do you actually believe these stories?" She was making a scene, threatening to disrupt the court, when a phone call interrupted her performance. "Vivian, why hasn't your mom called for 2 days, and she hasn't returned to their hometown?" Her expression froze. The kindergarten teacher called again. Milo hasn't been to school for 3 days. Is he sick? Vivian trembled all over. What did you say? The staff member hung up the phone. Please do not answer calls during the trial. Evidence began to play on the large screen. In the surveillance footage, Henry and Margaret's screams of torture, Milos' final cries. Julian's twisted smile, the sound of blades slicing through flesh. Vivian stared at those images, her eyes slowly lost focus. She grabbed my hand like a drowning person clutching at a final straw. Ethan, Henry and Margaret are still alive, right? I took out the 3 urns. It's too late. Where were you when they needed you most? Now they don't want you either. She held the urns, her expression distorted. Tears mixed with her flawless makeup, streaking ugly lines across her face. It was my fault. I let you down. I could have saved you. She suddenly erupted, picking up the urns and hurling them at Julian. I'll get revenge for you. Julian was sentenced to death. When the bailiffs finally pulled her away, her pure face was twisted and distorted. Her nails left white marks on my sleeve. Ethan, I only have you left. I looked at the judge, my voice cold. She assisted in murder and tried to kill me. Please issue a joint verdict. She looked at me in disbelief, and the last glimmer of light in her eyes extinguished. I took a deep breath and stepped into the sunlight outside the door. The sun was blinding, yet warm. 3 days after the verdict, I visited Vivian at the county. Her perfect makeup was gone, replaced by a prison uniform, like a faded painting. Through the glass, her eyes were vacant, like a body without a soul. Ethan, do you remember when we first met? Her voice was hoarse, tinged with a hint of bewilderment. The last row of the library, you were reading Proust. I asked to borrow a pen from you, and you didn't even lift your head. I remained silent. Those memories were soaked in blood. Later, you came to the library every day, just to catch another glimpse of me. But I wouldn't even look you in the eye, thinking you weren't good enough for me. She shook her head with a bitter smile. In the end, it was I who wasn't good enough for you. You know, I've always envied others who had Henry and Margaret's love. When I met Julian, he said he could help me find my birth parents. I was like a person possessed, listening to his every word. But he never intended to help me, he was just using me. Her fingers traced the glass, as if sketching something. That day in the private room, I actually saw the footage on the monitor. I knew he was killing people, but I couldn't admit it was Henry and Margaret. I chose to believe it was fake, that you were tricking me. Tears streamed down her cheeks. I was so afraid to face the truth. So I pretended not to know, continuing to immerse myself in a false happiness. It wasn't until I saw the evidence in court that I realized how ridiculous I had been. She suddenly looked up at me, her eyes were clear. Do you hate me? I stood up and turned to leave. I stopped hating a long time ago. Hatred requires caring, and you are no longer worth caring about. Her heart-wrenching cries came from behind me. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Henry and Margaret. I'm sorry, Milo. I'm sorry. I didn't look back, pushing open the visitation room door. Sunlight streamed into the hallway, casting a long shadow. In that shadow, there was no longer a place for her. A year later, I moved to another city. The air here held no trace of blood, and the streets were free of familiar shadows. No shadows of the past, no painful memories. I kept Henry and Margaret's and Milos' ashes with me, and found a sunny spot for them. My balcony was filled with Milos' favorite sunflowers, the golden blooms turned with the sun. Every morning when the sun shone in, I sat before the urns and talked to them. I told them I found a new job, and my colleagues are friendly. I told them I made new friends, who took me to the movies and on excursions. I told them I finally learned to braid hair nicely, just like Milo used to want. It was a pity he would never see it. Days passed, and the wounds slowly healed. I learned to live alone, and I learned not to look back. Until that day, I read an unassuming piece of news in the newspaper. Vivian, while serving her sentence at the county, was found to have committed suicide by hanging. Before she died, in her narrow cell, she carved, "I'm sorry," repeatedly into the wall with her fingernails. The prison guard said she had been very quiet that year, like she was invisible. Every day she just sat by her bed, staring blankly, occasionally speaking softly, as if talking to someone. No one expected her to choose such a way to leave. I put down the newspaper, feeling little ripple of emotion. Perhaps she was finally crushed by guilt, or perhaps she simply didn't want to live anymore. These things had nothing to do with me, I had long since let go. I packed my things and went to work, passing a flower shop. The owner was trimming roses, and morning dew dripped from the petals. Sunlight, filtered through the water droplets, refracted into a rainbow of colors. I remembered she loved white roses most, saying they were the purest flower. Back then, she wore a white dress, smiling at me from a sea of flowers. Driven by an inexplicable impulse, I bought a bouquet. I went to her grave site, but found the headstone was already covered with white roses. Her biological parents had finally found her, and they were kneeling before the grave, weeping bitterly. "Vivian, why didn't you wait for us? Didn't you always want to meet us? Why did you do this to yourself?" They said she was kidnapped by human traffickers as a child and sold to an orphanage. They had been searching all these years, but they were always a step too late. Now that they had finally found her, all that remained was a solitary grave. Ethan silently placed the bouquet down and turned to leave. Suppressed sobs came from behind him, but they could no longer stir his heart. The sun was bright, warm on his back. This time, Ethan had truly let go, because knew she had found her final redemption. And, too, needed to move forward. A long life lay ahead, and Ethan would live it well for Henry and Margaret and Milo. This episode concludes. Thank you for joining. When faced with betrayal, will you compromise or fight back? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next episode.